In the Egyptian desert of the 4th century, a man of immense strength and terrifying reputation led a gang of 75 bandits. His name was Moses, the Black. Born in Ethiopia, once a slave, a murderer, and a thief, he would cross the Nile with a sword clenched between his teeth to raid defenseless villages. But a single question to the sun would change everything. If you are God, speak to me. What followed became one of the most extraordinary spiritual transformations in Christian history, from feared criminal to venerated saint, from bandit leader to martyr of peace. This is a story I believe you've never truly heard, how the most unlikely man became one of the greatest saints of the church. Chapter 1. The Terror of the Nile. In the Nile Valley during the 4th century, one name was whispered with fear: Moses, the Black. Born in Ethiopia, his dark skin contrasted sharply with the ferocity in his eyes. It wasn't just his appearance that caused fear, but a reputation built on blood and violence. Expelled by his Egyptian master after committing theft and a brutal murder, Moses found in crime not just refuge, but a kingdom, where his overwhelming strength made him king. The gang he led was no small band. 75 men followed his commands without question. Together they terrorized entire villages, leaving a trail of destruction wherever they went. His audacity was legendary. Once, when a barking dog prevented a robbery, Moses swam across the Nile with a dagger clenched between his teeth, just to take revenge on the dog's owner by stealing and slaughtering his sheep. His physical capacity was as astonishing as his cruelty. Contemporary accounts say he could devour an entire sheep and down a full wineskin in one meal. No one dared challenge him. When the sun set over the Egyptian horizon, doors were locked and prayers were whispered that Moses and his men would pass by without stopping. What few knew, however, was that behind that unrestrained violence lay a deep emptiness. In moments of solitude, Moses would stare at the starry desert sky and feel that something was missing. A restlessness that no theft, no drunkenness, no brutality could fill. At the height of his worldly power, he began to sense the insignificance of his own existence. Lesser-known stories reveal that Moses was not only feared, but respected for his tactical intelligence. He knew the desert like the back of his hand and used this knowledge to ambush wealthy caravans on trade routes. His gang operated with near-military precision, rendering local authorities powerless. Even the mighty Roman Empire failed to capture the man they called the shadow of the desert. But every redemption story begins with a fall. And for Moses, that fall was near. If you're drawn to inspiring stories like this one, don't forget to check out our ebook, 50 Saints, Stories and Prayers for Divine Intervention, featuring other lives of redemption and faith. Available now in our online store, link below. But let's return to our story, because what happened next would change not only Moses' life, but the history of Christian spirituality forever. Chapter 2. The Voice of the Desert. The transformation of Moses began unexpectedly, as is often the case with the greatest conversions. One scorching morning, while gazing at the rising sun over the desert horizon, something inside him broke. With the same intensity he once used to attack his victims, Moses raised his eyes to the heavens and cried out, "O sun, if you are God, speak to me." What followed was silence, deafening silence. But within his heart, a gentle voice whispered, "The true God is known by the monks of the desert of Scatis." That inner voice awakened in him an irresistible curiosity. Without hesitation, Moses strapped on his sword, not to attack, but out of habit and for protection, and set out for the monastery. The monks of Scetis had heard tales of the fearsome bandit, and when his imposing silhouette appeared on the horizon, fear spread through the community. Saint Isidore, one of the elders, was the first to meet him. With trembling voice but firm gaze, he asked what such a dangerous man wanted from the servants of God. Moses' answer shocked them all. "I've come to know the true God." Those words, spoken by lips once used for threats and cruelty, even sounded strange to Moses himself. But Saint Isidore recognized in them the sincerity of a searching heart. He brought Moses to Saint Macarius the Great, the spiritual leader of the community, who saw beyond the threatening exterior and discerned the hidden potential for holiness, buried under layers of sin and violence. The catechumenate was anything but easy for a man accustomed to taking everything by force. Moses had to learn patience, humility, and above all to trust a power greater than his own physical strength. When he was finally baptized, tears streamed down his sun-scorched, battle-hardened face. That weeping was not weakness. It was liberation, as if a crushing burden had been lifted from his soul. One little-known detail: during his baptism, Moses insisted on being immersed 3 times, not only to honor the Trinity, but to symbolize his desperate longing to be wholly purified from his past. Witnesses reported that upon rising from the water the 3rd time, his face radiated a peace never before seen on that man. Even the oldest monks murmured in awe that they had rarely witnessed such a visible transformation in a convert. But his true battle was just beginning. To become a monk meant declaring war, not against others, but against his own inner demons. And for a man who had spent decades feeding the most violent passions, this would be the hardest war of his life. A war that would demand more courage than any physical fight he had ever endured. Chapter 3. The Monk on Fire. Moses' conversion was only the first step in a grueling journey of transformation. The violent habits and carnal desires that had dominated him for years didn't vanish with baptism. Like a flame refusing to go out, temptation assaulted him day and night, testing his resolve to remain faithful to the monastic path. The nights were especially hard. While the other monks slept, Moses stood in his cell, praying until dawn. When sleep came, it brought disturbing dreams, ghosts from his past that tormented him. To combat these visions, he adopted extreme ascetic practices. He would fast for days, subsisting on small portions of bread and water. His once powerful body began to wither, but his determination only grew stronger. One practice particularly impressed even the most devout monks. Each night while the community slept, Moses would visit the cells of elderly brothers, gather their empty water jugs, and walk for miles to fill them from a distant well. He returned before dawn, ensuring that the elders awoke with fresh water. No one knew who performed this act of charity, until one night, a sleepless monk caught him in the act. But the demons were not ready to release a soul that had been theirs for so long. In one violent episode, as Moses drew water from the well, he felt a powerful, invisible blow to his back. He collapsed as if dead and remained unconscious until morning. The brothers found him and carried him to his cell, where he lay bedridden for a year, tormented not only by pain, but by spiritual darkness. It was in this critical moment that Saint Isidore intervened. Seeing his disciples suffering, the elder prayed intensely for days, pleading with God to deliver Moses. What happened next was described by chroniclers of the time as an extraordinary miracle. In a vision, Moses saw a multitude of demons gathered in the west, ready for battle, and to the east, an even greater army of heavenly angels. Isidore explained that this vision symbolized Moses' interior battle, and that with perseverance, victory was certain. After this spiritual intervention, something profound changed. The temptations that had plagued him for 6 years suddenly ceased. The peace he had longed for flooded his soul. The former bandit, purified by the fire of trial, had emerged a new man. The older monks marveled at how the one once known for his violence now radiated a serenity possessed only by true saints. But his final test, the ultimate proof of his humility, was still to come. Chapter 4. The Final Test. News of Moses' radical transformation spread far beyond the monastery walls. His journey from feared bandit to exemplary monk astonished all who heard it. The Patriarch of Alexandria, upon hearing of this extraordinary conversion, decided Moses should be ordained a deacon and eventually a priest. But Moses resisted the honor, considering himself unworthy due to his blood-stained past. On the day of his ordination, an unexpected test awaited him. As Moses approached the altar wearing the white vestments of a deacon, the bishop, wishing to test his humility, secretly instructed some clergy to shout insults and expel him from the sanctuary. "Get out of here, unworthy Ethiopian!" they cried, mocking his origins and skin color. Moses' response revealed the depth of his transformation. He said nothing. He lowered his head and walked away in silence. Impressed by such genuine humility, the bishop called him back and completed the ordination on the spot. "Now, Abba Moses, you are entirely white," the bishop said, not referring to his skin, which remained dark, but to the purity of his soul. When asked later how he felt being insulted, Moses answered simply, "They spoke the truth. I am not worthy. My skin is black as ashes, just like my past. It is only by God's mercy that I stand here." One of the most iconic episodes in Moses' life came when a young monk was accused of a serious fault. The elders convened a council to judge him and insisted that Moses attend. At first, he refused, but when he finally appeared, he carried with him an old, torn basket filled with sand, which poured out behind him as he walked. Intrigued, the monks asked what the gesture meant. Moses replied, "My sins trail behind me like this sand, and I do not see them. And yet today I am summoned to judge another." The council was moved. The accused monk was forgiven. The assembly quietly dispersed. That day, Moses taught more through a single act than many do in long sermons. As the years passed, Moses founded his own monastic community, drawing disciples who sought his spiritual guidance. Fascinatingly, many of his followers were former criminals, men who, inspired by his transformation, left behind lives of violence in pursuit of redemption. Moses had a unique gift for reaching such men, because he knew their battles firsthand. His reputation as a spiritual counselor grew so much that even Roman officials and influential citizens would travel days across the desert to seek his wisdom. Yet whenever he heard of important visitors coming, Moses often fled. On one occasion, when a provincial judge came to see him, Moses escaped to the marshes. On the road, the judge encountered an old monk and asked where he could find the famous Abba Moses. Not recognizing him, the judge was speaking to Moses himself, who replied, "Why look for that old fool? He's not worth the visit." Only later did the judge discover he had spoken to the very saint, whose humility was even greater than his fame. Chapter 5. Martyr of Peace. At the age of 75, after more than 3 decades of monastic life, Moses received a supernatural premonition. During a night of prayer, it was revealed to him that nomadic raiders planned to attack the monastery. But instead of organizing defenses or seeking help from Roman authorities, Moses gathered his disciples and gave them an unexpected instruction. "Flee, brothers. The invaders will come tomorrow, and there will be bloodshed." The younger monks, confused by the command, asked why Moses himself would not flee with them. His reply revealed the full depth of his spiritual transformation. I lived by the sword for half my life. Now, as Christ taught, those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. This is the day I have waited for, the day of my true liberation." His words echoed a prophecy made years earlier by Saint Macarius, who had foretold that Moses would one day wear the crown of martyrdom. 7 monks, moved by loyalty and love for their spiritual father, refused to leave him. "If you stay, we stay," they declared. Moses did not force them to go, but made one thing clear: they must not resist when the invaders arrived. That night, the small group spent hours in prayer, preparing themselves spiritually for what was to come. A solemn silence hovered over the nearly empty monastery, broken only by the soft murmur of prayers. At dawn, just as Moses had foreseen, a band of Berber raiders stormed the monastery. They found Moses and the 7 monks kneeling in prayer within a small chapel. There were no screams, no fleeing, no resistance. As the attackers drew their swords, Moses raised his eyes to heaven, and according to witnesses, his face radiated supernatural peace. His final words were not spoken to the attackers, but to God. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." One monk survived the massacre, hidden behind a pillar in the chapel. Through him, we know the sacred details of that moment. He witnessed something extraordinary. As the bodies of the martyrs fell to the ground, 7 luminous crowns descended from heaven, one for each slain monk. The brightest crown rested upon Moses' head, whose blood now soaked the desert floor. Not as a perpetrator of violence, but as a witness to Christ's peace. The symbolism was unmistakable. Moses, who had once shed the blood of the innocent, now offered his own blood as a sacrifice. The man who had terrorized the Nile Valley died like a lamb, offering no resistance, embodying the Christian ideal of nonviolence and forgiveness. His death was not merely an end, but the perfect culmination of a life of redemption. The final act in a spiritual drama that had begun decades earlier, when a bloodthirsty bandit heard the voice of the desert. Chapter 6: The Saint, the Demon's Fear. The martyrdom of Saint Moses, the Black, did not silence his story. It amplified it through the centuries. His body was reverently buried in the monastery of Alberamos, in the Scetis Desert, where pilgrims from all over the world still go to pay homage. The site has become a center of spiritual healing, with countless reports of miracles attributed to his intercession. Particularly notable are stories of people struggling with addiction and violent tendencies who found liberation after praying at his tomb. The Church officially recognized his sanctity, assigning his feast to August 28th in the Roman calendar, and to Paoni 24th in the Coptic calendar. Remarkably, his Western feast coincides with that of St. Augustine, another great convert whose life was transformed by grace. This liturgical coincidence is no accident, but a powerful reminder of God's ability to redeem even the most broken of lives. Saint Moses is venerated as the patron of many causes: converts, those who struggle with anger and violence, Africans and the African diaspora, and those seeking strength to break destructive habits. In traditional iconography, he is portrayed as a dark-skinned monk, often holding a cross or a jug of water, symbols of his redemption and humble service. His icons can be found in Catholic and Orthodox churches around the world, testifying to the universality of his spiritual appeal. A lesser-known aspect of his legacy is the influence he had on monastic spirituality. His maxims and advice were preserved in the collection known as the Sayings of the Desert Fathers. One of his most famous quotes, "Go sit in your cell and your cell will teach you everything." This simple instruction continues to inspire monks and contemplatives to this day. It encapsulates the wisdom that self-knowledge and intimacy with God are found in silence and solitude, a truth that transcends religious boundaries. In the Orthodox tradition, Saint Moses is honored with a particularly striking title, the Saint Whom the Demons Feared. This title refers not only to his personal victory over temptation, but also to the power of his intercession for those who battle spiritual oppression. Reports of successful exorcisms after invoking his name are documented from the 5th century to the present, especially in Coptic and Ethiopian communities. In recent years, the figure of Saint Moses has taken on renewed relevance as a symbol of racial reconciliation and social justice. His life demonstrates that holiness knows no ethnic or social barriers. In the United States, an Orthodox organization named the Fellowship of Saint Moses the Black works to promote awareness of African saints and combat racism within Christian communities. Their motto, "From Bandit to Saint," echoes the radical transformation possible when divine grace meets an open heart, even the most unlikely one. Conclusion. The story of Saint Moses. The Black remains one of the most powerful testimonies to the transformative power of divine grace. From ruthless killer to venerated saint, his journey reminds us that no one, absolutely no one, is beyond the possibility of redemption. In a world that often judges and condemns people for their past, Moses challenges us to look deeper, to see the potential for sainthood hidden within every human soul, no matter how darkened by sin it may seem. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might be struggling to believe that change is possible. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring narratives of saints who defied expectations and transformed the world through radical faith. As Saint Moses taught with his life and death, no matter how dark the night of your soul may seem, the dawn of grace is always within reach for those brave enough to seek it. May his intercession inspire us never to give up on ourselves or on others. For the same God who turned a bandit into a saint still works miracles of conversion today.